Hey guys, Chris Fix here. Today I'm going to show you how to super flush your cooling system to get all that dirty, old, contaminated coolant out of the radiator, out of your engine block, out of your heater core. Just really get a good flush going and then fill it up with brand new coolant. Before doing this super flush, go check out my other video on how to test your coolant and make sure that you need to flush it. I go through all the different types of tests you could do to check your coolant and see if it's good or bad. So when you're done watching this video, go check that out. I'll leave the link in the description below. Before you touch the cooling system at all, whether it's taking the radiator cap off, whether it's opening the petcock to drain the fluid, touching any hoses, always make sure that the engine is cool, the system is pressurized when it is hot, and you don't want to burn yourself. I'm working on a Ford 3-liter engine, it's a V6. In my case I have a radiator cap, and I also have a coolant reservoir tank. Some cars might not have this radiator cap, so whatever I do through the radiator cap, you could do through the coolant reservoir tank. A couple of days before you're going to flush your coolant, you're going to want to use a chemical coolant flush. You can see it is a flush and cleaner. This one's actually supposed to be mixed with water, so you're supposed to empty your coolant, add water, and then add this. But the thing is, it's getting below freezing, so I'm just going to mix this right in with the coolant. I'm going to add our coolant flush to the coolant reservoir. The chemical flush is really going to help flush out any contaminants, loosen up any debris, and it's just going to make your super flush that much better. Use the whole bottle. And now I'm going to go drive the car, put a few hundred miles on her, and then we'll empty the coolant. A few days later, all the chemical flush has been circulating throughout the system. I used my heat to get it in the heater core. It's been through the radiator, all the hoses, through the engine block. So now we're ready to do a coolant flush. In order to do a super flush, here's everything you're going to need. Just have some basic hand tools, a couple of drain pans to catch the old dirty coolant. We got a bunch of distilled water. Make sure you're using distilled water and not filtered water. The only ingredient in this should be pure water. I bought 2 chemical flushes because I used one and I'm going to use another in a few minutes. And then you need to get coolant. I'm using a 50-50 mix so I don't have to add water. It's cheaper if you use the concentrate, but for convenience I like using 50-50. It's all up to you. I'm using long life antifreeze. It's just that much better. And this is the green stuff. So you want to check your owner's manual and see what kind of coolant you need to use, and also the capacity, so how much coolant that your cooling system will use. In my case, I know I need to use the green coolant and not the orange coolant. It says it right there. And when I go into my owner's manual under coolant with air conditioning, I have an air conditioner on my 3-liter V6. It takes 10.2 quarts, so that's about 2.5 gallons. Now that we know the capacity and what kind of coolant that we're going to use, and we know all the tools that we need, let's begin. First step, grab one of your containers here and we're going to slide it underneath the car. So this right here is the radiator shroud. There's my fan. This whole thing here is the radiator. That way is the front of the car, just to give you a reference. Here's the lower radiator hose, but we want to look for something called a petcock. It's pretty much just a valve that lets the coolant out. Usually it's in the corners of the radiator. So here's one corner, but we have the lower radiator hose, so I'm going to go check the other corner. You can see here's the other corner and here's the petcock. It's just a valve and you see the coolant's going to flow right out of there. If you don't have a petcock like this, then what you do is you have to take off the lower radiator hose. Get a pliers, take that hose clamp off, pull the hose off, and let all the radiator fluid drain. This petcock is a 3/4 of an inch, so just get your ratchet on here, 3/4 of an inch, crack it loose. And you can see this coolant looks disgusting. It pretty much looks like a coffee or a mud, and that's not good. Now you'll notice the petcock isn't draining very quickly, so I'm going to show you how to make it drain faster since we have our coolant catch pan where it needs to be. All you have to do is go to the radiator cap and pop it open. I don't know if you could hear that, but you can hear the air escaping. I'm going to take this cap off, and when I do, you're going to hear the coolant flow out a lot faster. So now we're going to let this drain completely out and we'll move on to the next step. I'm going to catch some of this coolant so we can see it good before and after. Good. So as that continues to drain, one thing that's not going to drain is your coolant reservoir tank. So we're going to open that up. You can see that all that coolant is still in there and it's dirty and disgusting. So what we're going to do is we're going to just keep this on loosely. We're going to go and find the hose. The hose runs down there, runs across, runs up here, all the way across right to the radiator cap, and we're going to just take this off, remove the hose. The hose is actually clamped on right there. You could remove that clamp if you want, but all you need to do is get the end of this hose below the reservoir and then gravity will pull the coolant out of this. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to aim for my coolant pan where the old coolant is emptying into. Just slide this down here. If we go underneath the truck, we can see it comes out right here. You're going to want to somehow suck on this. I wouldn't use your mouth. I try to find something that could start sucking on this just to get the fluid going, and then the rest will empty into here. This is getting filled up, so let's get a new bucket under here. Good. Now let's drain the reservoir. I'm going to try to use one of these turkey basters to start the flow of coolant, and then gravity should do the rest. And there we go. Now we'll let this drain out. And all I did was press the bulb in and let it suck it out to pull that water down. And then now gravity's doing the rest of the job. This is almost empty. You can see this is pretty dirty in here, so you're going to want to flush this out too. Now you could remove your coolant overflow tank and clean it out, but I know removing this is a real pain, so I'm going to actually just flush it in here. So I got my hose, I'm going to use high pressure water. We're going to let that drain. I'll do that a few times to get that really cleaned out. We look in here after doing that, you can see all the stuff that got flushed up, so we're going to get this nice and clean and not even have to remove it from the vehicle. Okay, let's check out the inside here, see how much cleaner it is. It's definitely a lot cleaner. There's some debris right in the corner there where it drains, but that's not a big deal. We're going to be flushing this whole radiator out multiple times for the super flush, so I'm not really concerned. But it definitely does look a lot cleaner in here compared to before. And that hard stuff that's connected to the plastic, if you really want to get that off, you could get in there with a pipe cleaner, start scraping that away. But this is good enough for me. So now we're going to move on to the next step. Remember, you want to recycle all your flushed fluid, all your antifreeze. This is poisonous to animals. If a dog or a cat gets into this and drinks it, which it does taste sweet, they will die. So you want to make sure you recycle it. It's bad for the environment. So make sure you have a bunch of containers on hand and a funnel. And then after you're done, make sure you cap them both off, and now they're ready to be recycled. Throughout this whole super flush video, I'll be recycling all my antifreeze. And if you're wondering how to get rid of your old antifreeze, call your town recycle center. A lot of times they take it for free. And also call around to your local auto parts stores. Many times they'll take it for free as well. The radiator is completely drained. We cleaned out the reservoir. And now the next step for the super flush is to find your thermostat. So usually the thermostat, you follow the upper radiator hose into the engine block. And you can see it comes down into here, right into there. And then right here where this connection is where the thermostat is. So we're going to take the thermostat out so we have a lot of flow even when the engine's cool. If your thermostat is hard to get to, you could just omit this step. I'm taking the thermostat out because it's easy to get to, and I'm replacing the thermostat anyway. To get the thermostat off, we're going to be using a 10mm with an extension. Just go in here. There's 2 bolts, one on this side. That's one. I'll get the other side. And that's 2. Now this should just come right up, like so. There's the thermostat. Get my hand in here. Pop that thermostat out. You can see there's a gasket on this thermostat. You will want to replace that gasket. And the thermostat itself looks good. It's fully closed, which is what you want when it's cold. Make sure you note the direction of the thermostat when you take it out. Our thermostat was in here like this, so this bottom part was facing down, and this little top part that comes to a point was facing up. So with the thermostat removed, now we're going to have full flow even if the engine's cold, and even when it's warm we'll have a lot more flow than without the thermostat. So now we're going to bolt this back up. Tighten each bolt down by hand first, and once each bolt is tightened down by hand, tighten it a little bit on this side, switch over to the other bolt, tighten it a little bit on this side, go back, tighten it a little bit more on this side. Now it's pretty much snug, and we're just going to give it a little bit more of a turn. You don't want to tighten this too much. Sometimes this goes into aluminum, and you could strip the aluminum, so you just want to make sure that you tighten this so it's snug, and I'll give you the torque specs later. So that's good. So now that our cooling system's completely drained, I'm going to close this by hand. I'm not going to use a wrench or anything. This is only plastic. I don't want to damage the threads or strip anything. You can see I was able to get it completely closed just by hand. Now don't forget we have this hose dangling down. Let's reconnect this. That hose is easy enough. Just pull it up. And that goes on just like that. Now we're going to fill up the cooling system with just plain distilled water. It takes 2.5 of these. And then we'll run the engine, get everything circulated, mix the water with all the contaminants, and do another flush. You want to try to find a funnel that'll fit in. So if I push this down, it actually fits in really good and that's not going anywhere. And that just makes the job that much easier. They actually sell special funnels that connect onto this. They're like no leak radiator funnels or something like that. And those are actually very helpful. I don't have one of those, so I'm just using a regular funnel. Now fill the radiator with distilled water. I'm also going to add another one of these chemical flushes. Okay, now when this doesn't go down any further, I still have almost a whole jug left, so there's air in the system. What we're going to do is we're going to start the car, and then we're going to feed more in here as the water pump sucks up the water. And now fill the radiator to the top. Then we're going to get our radiator cap, put that on, make sure it's completely closed. Now let's go and fill the reservoir. Don't worry about adding a little bit extra, because if you're low on coolant, this is a good backup. It'll suck out the coolant from here and add it to your radiator. But you also want to have some room for expansion, so that's pretty good. Now we're going to go in the truck, we're going to start the engine. And we're going to pay attention to that coolant gauge. I'm going to run the engine for about 10 minutes. You could go for a ride if you want. Wait a few minutes before you go for a ride and make sure that coolant gauge doesn't spike. If it does, that means you have some air in the system. And then all you have to do is squeeze the upper radiator hose as the engine's running and try to bleed the air out. Or if you have a bleeder valve on your water pump, just open that up, let the air out and close it. Don't forget, when you go for your ride, make sure the heat's on all the way and then turn the fan on. This will get the heater core circulating and all the contaminants in the heater core flushed out. So with the heat on all the way and the temperature gauge not fluctuating at all, I'm going to go for a ride and get all that water in the coolant system to flush through the engine and get that cooling system nice and clean. So I'm back from my ride. The coolant temperature really didn't go up at all. It's pretty cold out, and since the thermostat's open, a 5-10 minute ride won't let the water heat up very much. I still have the heat on. You could shut this off if you want now that you're back, and now we'll drain that water out of the cooling system. So now we'll go back underneath, we'll drain the petcock. Be careful because the water might be hot. Remember, to make it drain faster, you're going to open up the radiator cap. Make sure this is cool to the touch. Pop that open. So I'm going to grab a sample for the first flush with fresh water. So here's after the first flush. You can see it's still pretty dirty. What you're going to do is you want this to run clear. So that was nice and clean, bottled water. Now look at it. So we're getting all that dirty, contaminated fluid out. And this is going to really help our cooling system here. Now, depending on how bad your cooling system is, it might take 1 flush, it might take 2 flushes, it might take 4 flushes. So with the cooling system completely drained, we'll tighten this up again and we'll repeat the process. Now there's no need to show you the process. All it is filling it up again. Make sure you get the radiator filled. Remember to fill your coolant reservoir. Run the engine, make sure the engine isn't overheating. Run it for 5 to 10 minutes, drive around if you want. Drain it again. Just keep doing those steps until that water runs clear. Okay, the radiator is completely drained. The system has been completely flushed. You can see there's the original. There's our first flush with fresh water and also the chemical flush. And then there's our second flush with just fresh water and our third flush with just fresh water. And then this is what it's going to be after we put the 50-50 antifreeze mix in. As you guys know, I like to show proof of the work I do, and if that's not proof right there, I don't know what is. So now that you've seen the results, let's finish this flush up. I just want to make sure you have everything done correctly. We have the whole radiator drained completely. We also have the coolant reservoir completely drained and flushed out. When we did the flush, we turned the heat on, which flushed out the heater core as well. If your heater core is clogged or not heating up, I have a video on how to do that. Very easy to follow. You can find that video link in the description below. But we did flush this out a little bit by just running the heat as we ran the car for each of the 3 flushes. Now the whole cooling system is completely empty, so now we're going to fill it up with brand new antifreeze. So this is a pretty important part. You just did all this work to flush out your cooling system. You want to make sure you do this right. On my coolant overflow tank, you can see there's a sticker here. So this sticker shows you're not supposed to be using the orange coolant, you're supposed to be using the green coolant. And also, if you want to see what kind of coolant you need and the capacities and stuff I already mentioned, check your owner's manual. That's the best thing to do to be sure. Most vehicles need a 50-50 antifreeze and water mix. In this case, I'm going to be using a pre-mixed antifreeze. It's just a lot more convenient. Sure, it is a little bit more expensive compared to buying the full concentrate and then diluting it with distilled water, but it's just a lot easier. If you want to use concentrated antifreeze, be my guest. Another thing, I'm using Long Life. This stuff lasts 150,000 miles or 5 years. Since the cooling system's completely drained before we fill it with new coolant, we want to change out our thermostats. So I have my new thermostat here, and we already took the old one out. So I'm going to take the thermostat housing off, and we're going to put in this new thermostat. Same process as before to take it off. 10 millimeter. That's one. That's two. And then that comes right out. You want to make sure you remove the whole gasket, so I'm going to use a plastic scraper. I'm using plastic so that I don't gouge the surface here. You don't want to gouge that metal surface because then water could seep through even though you have a gasket on there. You want to make sure you remove all that gasket material. The more you can get off by hand, the better. And this is actually coming off pretty good by hand. Okay, that wasn't too bad. Now you're going to get your scraper. Any pieces that didn't come off, scrape it off. Get that surface nice and clean. To clean the gasket surface off more, I'm using a paper towel and some brake cleaner. Just spray some brake clean on your paper towel. We're going to get in here, just rub all that off. The brake clean will help lift some of that dirt in there that you're having trouble getting off with the scraper. Okay, that surface looks pretty good. And also don't forget the other side of your thermostat housing. Take a look here. Surprisingly, the gasket seems like it didn't stick to this side. You might want to just give that a little clean, and we'll put the new thermostat in. So new thermostat gasket goes right on top. Just line the holes. Goes on just like that. Now when we put our thermostat in, if you remember, the deeper part goes in towards the engine. And the reason why is because this deeper part here is what adjusts the thermostat. So this needs to get hot in order to open up the thermostat. And since inside the engine is hot, you want this to be facing down. So this very simply goes in just like that. Put that right on top. In this case, these bolts don't need any Teflon or anything because they don't go into the cooling system. The antifreeze doesn't touch them. So you can just push them right in like that. I'm going to slightly tighten this one down just to get the thread started, kind of hold everything in place. Now with the thread started on that bolt, this could just swivel back and forth and we could get the other bolt in. Get that in there and then tighten that up. Now these bolts get tightened down to 10 foot-pounds, 120 inch-pounds. So the first thing I'm going to do is tighten both bolts by hand all the way. Got the left one tightened by hand, now we'll do the right one. Now since there's a gasket on here, there's two bolts, we want to tighten both bolts down evenly. So I'm going to tighten this bolt down first. You can see it's pretty tight, it's snug there. I'm going to give it a little bit of a turn, and then I'm going to go to the other side, do the same exact thing. That's pretty snug, then I'm going to give it a little bit of a turn. Good. I'm going to go back to this side, a little bit of a turn. Go back to the other side, a little bit of a turn. Now I'm going to tighten it down to 10 foot-pounds. I'm just going to do it by hand. Good. Get the other one down. Good. Now that our thermostat is in, we could fill the radiator and the whole cooling system up with brand new antifreeze and go for a ride. My vehicle takes 10.2 quarts, which is pretty much 2.5 gallons. So it's going to take 2.5 of these. That's 2. Now you can see after 2 bottles, it kind of backs up a little bit. And now all you have to do is find a radiator hose. I'm going to use this upper radiator hose. And you just give it a squeeze, just like this. And that burps the air out. And if that's as much air as you could get out, now we'll go start the engine and the rest of this will get sucked down. We could add our other half. Before we start the engine, just go down to your serpentine belt. Make sure that you don't have any liquid on the belt so your belt doesn't go flying off. So just make sure you clean that off. Now we'll go start the truck and you'll see this will get sucked right into the radiator. Not as much got sucked in as I thought would because I forgot we put the thermostat back in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for the car to warm up. The thermostat will open just a little bit and then it'll suck this fluid in. So while you're doing this, you're trying to get the air out of the system plus adding more antifreeze. You want to keep an eye on your temperature gauge, make sure you don't overheat. If you want to get some of that coolant to get sucked down, just rev up the engine just a little bit. And if we come over to the engine after revving it, You can see it sucked a bunch down. So now I'll go shut the engine and we'll put the radiator cap on. When putting your radiator cap on, you want to make sure you put it on properly. It turns, then you have to press down and then you turn, and that locks in. You want to make sure this is connected properly because the radiator cap is actually under pressure. The whole cooling system is under pressure. Don't forget, we'll have to fill up the coolant reservoir. On the coolant reservoir, there is a fill hot line and a fill cool line. You can kind of see it down there. It says cold fill, so that's the line we want to fill it up to. I filled it up just a little bit above that cold fill line just because we ran the engine a little bit, so it's slightly warm. We can take this out, close up our cap here. Okay, let's go for a ride. Now we're going to go for a ride. You want to pay attention to your temperature gauge. You can see here, it's slowly rising. We want to make sure it stays at the middle as we go for our drive. You don't want it to get too hot, and you don't want it to stay cold. We're also going to make sure that we have the heat on. We're going to come here, and you want to make sure that you're going to feel heat. If you don't feel heat, you have air trapped in the system. I can feel heat already. And just sitting here for like 2 minutes when I'm talking to you guys, you can see it's coming up to the middle already. So let's go for a ride and see what happens. Okay, went out for a ride for a few minutes. Brought everything up to operating temperature. You can see it's right there in the middle. Exactly where you want to be. The heat is very hot, which is awesome. And that's pretty much it. When you get back, let the car cool down. You could check your coolant level and make sure it's good. I used a little bit more than 2.5 gallons, which is exactly what my truck calls for. So I'm not concerned that the level's low, but if you want to check your level, just make sure that the engine cools down completely before you take that radiator cap off, and that's it. Now you have a nice and flushed cooling system. If I could do it on this truck, which was a mess, you could definitely do it on your vehicle. Hopefully this video was helpful. If it was, remember to give it a thumbs up. Also, if you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing. The top tip for this video is, if you're having a hard time getting air bubbles out of your cooling system, try shaking the car. Although it seems silly, a lot of times this shifts the coolant inside the engine and inside the radiator, and it'll burp the air out.